Hello, Internet! Welcome to Tales Showcase. I'm the Watcher of Newer. Thank you so much for giving this video a click. Now, as you may or may not know, this year marks the 10-year anniversary of DC Comics' New 52 reboot. For anyone not in the know, in 2011, DC's New 52 was a company-wide event that saw the cancellation of all the in-print series at the time and the erasure of the then-current timeline. All these were then replaced in September of that year with 52 new books that established a new continuity and was meant to, in theory, act as an ideal starting point for new readers who didn't want to be bogged down with decades of continuity. Now, it should probably be noted that this was not the first time DC attempted something like this. Continuity-altering events that attempt to retcon the more confusing aspects of the story have been a part of DC's utility belt since the mid-1980s. However, for one reason or another, this move was extremely polarizing among fans, with many up in arms about the seemingly unceremonious end to many characters and plotlines from the previous continuity. All that said, I thought it might be fun to this year go through each of the 52 series and see what's held up over the last decade, figure out the event's strong points, and maybe even get a consensus on whether or not this was a net positive for the characters and universe. The plan currently is to release one video every Sunday for the rest of the year, with each video taking on one title. So, if any of that sounds even mildly entertaining to you, consider tagging along. It'd be great to get other opinions on these books as I chug through them. Today, though, I'd like to start us off with the series AllStar Western, a bit of an anomaly for the big two comic companies as a non-superhero book. It's written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, with art by Moritat. The series opens in, oddly enough, Gotham City in the late 19th century, and follows DC's most enduring cowboy character, Jonah Hex. Hex is paired with Dr. Amadeus Arkham, an aspiring psychiatrist, the same one who forms Arkham Asylum, where Batman villains are incarcerated until they stop wanting to be. The story sees this odd couple traversing the fledgling city as they go about solving mysteries and dealing with Gotham's early-day villainy. I'm not going to recount the plot in depth. It's pretty good, but aside from a twist at the end of the second mystery, it's standard stuff. They investigate a heinous crime, and it turns out to be one of Gotham's elite. Then they move on to the next one. Granted, I've only read the first 6 issues, and the ending does seem to hint at a different setting, so the rest of the series probably isn't so cut and paste, but for the first 2 mysteries to have so similar outcomes, it just seems kinda lame. Especially since I enjoyed this quite a bit. There's a lot of titles in the New 52 that seem like they're just filler, and I was unfairly assuming that this would be that. As I was reading though, I found myself fully on board for the mystery and adventure. I think Hex and Arkham play off each other really well. They have a kind of Han Solo and C-3PO dynamic, with Arkham constantly trying to be helpful, but coming off as overbearing to the gruff, used to riding alone bounty hunter. The writers also do a good job of defining Jonah Hex's power level, showing him to be formidable on his own, but that it can be overpowered by someone twice his size if he's already had to fight that day. Gray and Palmiotti had previously written Jonah Hex in his own title, that was cancelled because of this event, and it clearly shows that they have an established understanding of the character. He really feels like a fully fleshed out person that everyone else is trying to figure out. It gives them a sense of mystery that's kinda hard to pull off with a character that's been around for decades. Arkham is also fun, acting as a sort of liaison between Hex and the more adjusted people of Gotham. He can become a little tiring when he goes on and on about his surroundings and trying to diagnose Hex, but on the whole, he serves as an ideal foil. The art from Moritat is spectacular. It's kinetic, it's emotional, it's expressive, it's fantastic. The characters are stylized enough without seeming like caricatures, and the action has real weight behind it, with every fight seeming like it could go either way. I personally feel the art is highlighted best in the first issue, where the color scheme is very muted. It adds to the old-timey feel of the book and also gives it an eerie aura that I think would have been beneficial in later issues where some new supernatural elements come into play. The scene where I think the color scheme works best is at the end of the first issue when Hex and Arkham are at a party for Gotham's elite, investigating a ring that's related to a series of murders. Arkham asks one of the guests about his ring, which is identical to the one they're investigating, and he reveals it's worn as part of an organization he belongs to. Hex tells Arkham they should leave now, but as Arkham protests, Hex tells him to look around as it slowly dawns on the reader that everyone there has the same ring, meaning that they've walked right into the middle of a death cult that has some of the most powerful men of Gotham as members. It's so tense, and the coloring adds to the tension as it goes from a waxy gray, ethereal feel and shifts into a dark blood red as the danger becomes apparent. Look, it's not subtle, but I still love it. This almost monochromatic feel doesn't extend past the first issue though, and while the rest of the series is still colored beautifully, it does seem like a shame to not keep such a unique aspect to help set itself apart even more. While on the topic of setting itself apart, you may have noticed that this setting is not stereotypically Western. Of course, in other mediums, Western has become much more of a vibe, and the setting doesn't necessarily have to be a small town on the brink of collapse. That said, setting the story in Victorian Gotham City was definitely a choice. And while I enjoy seeing the juxtaposition of lawless bounty hunter in more or less civilized society, I do feel that at times the story seems to hit us over the head with references. At one point, Arkham is talking about opening his own psychiatric hospital, and, that's fine. A quick nod, unnecessary but inconsequential. But in the same conversation, the construction of Blackgate Penitentiary, another Gotham landmark, is mentioned. This after the dinner party where we meet Mayor Cobblepot. Later still, we actually visit Wayne Manor, but not before Hex and Arkham traverse a literal Batcave. Do you get it? Look, it's not that big an issue, I just think it makes the world feel smaller if everything ties back to the one character. The one thing I do think benefits from setting this in Gotham City is the evil cult. I think the idea of Gotham being scouted as the epicenter of crime and villainy a century before Bruce Wayne would even exist is a cool nod and feels like it adds to the terrifying nature of the city. That said, the secret society is dealt with halfway through the third issue and is not brought up again, so forget it, I guess. Ultimately, while I think there are drawbacks to setting the story in a location so familiar to the fandom, I do enjoy and appreciate the willingness to try something a little different. However, I would understand some people coming into this story and being upset at this not being more of a straightforward Western. For those people, though, there are the backup stories. Also written by Grain Palmiotti, there are backup stories in these issues focusing on different characters from the Old West. These are much more in line with what I had initially been expecting, and they're genuinely great. In the 5 issues they're featured in, they tell 2 separate stories. The first centers on the character El Diablo, a different one than the Chato Santana iteration that appeared in 2016's Suicide Squad. This one is a man called Lazarus Lane, who is cursed to house a lesser demon that acts as a spirit of vengeance and is used to fight crime. The catch being that Lane has to be unconscious for the demon to emerge. Fun little side note, in some realities, this character is an ancestor to Lois Lane. So that's fun. The art in this story is done by Jordi Burnett, and it has a distinct feel to it, reminiscent almost of 70s era comics, possibly in honor of the previous AllStar Western series where both Diablo and Jonah Hex debuted. The next story revolves around a new character named the Barbary Ghost. Very clever. The daughter of Chinese immigrants, Yanmei Sen adopts the ghost persona to go after a mob boss who killed most of her family. After she finally tracks him down and tricks him into revealing the location of her mother, she sets off, fully intending to keep up her crime fighting. It's great. The art by Phil Winslade, who is given co-creator status, is fantastic. The intro scene stands out in particular for being super moody and eerie, but the whole story plays out as incredibly cinematic. As a whole, AllStar Western really stands out as a great book. The Barbary Ghost is a particular highlight, but aside from a few minor nitpicks here and there, the series is great. And in the spirit of the New 52, I think we should evaluate whether or not it's a good starting point for a new reader. Yeah, I'd say so. It's probably a weird one to start with, given that it doesn't really read as a superhero comic, but I don't think you'd be lost at any point. It doesn't require any prior knowledge, and it eases you into the weirdness. Regardless of when you decide to check it out, I definitely think you should. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe if you're interested even remotely in the New 52 thing that I'm doing. It's going to be a long ride, so I hope you can tag along. As always, thank you for joining me, and I'll hopefully see you in the next video. Take care.